Hello and welcome back. You're tuned into TMH's Daily English News. The headlines today: Ethiopia and allied forces have looted and destroyed an entire library of monasteries in Waldeba in Tigray of Ethiopia. Researchers say Tigray war has seen to 500,000 dead from violence as well as starvation, and the journalists have painted a worsening humanitarian crisis that is currently ongoing in the Tigray region. As we move on to our main stories for today, the Ethiopian and allied forces have looted and destroyed an entire library of monasteries of Waldeba in Tigray, Ethiopia. More than 3,000 vellum books, over 300 golden and silver wooden crosses were looted from the Waldeba Monastery, a prominent Tigrayan Orthodox monastery in Tsalemti district of western Tigray. The area has been liberated by the Tigrayan forces now, and Demtsi Wayana has spoke to some of the monks who have returned to after fleeing from their lives to different areas of Tigray following the attacks on the monastery that took place in March of 2021. There are more than 8,000 monks that were in the monastery before the war started. Let's listen to some of their testimonies.
Many were killed. We buried the bodies of at least 13 monks. There are many others who are unaccounted for. The top story was a repository of books. It had more than 3,000 vellum books and over 300 golden, silver, and wooden crosses. I was the custodian for all these. There were offices and various rooms, storing food that could have lasted us for a year. After they expelled us over a year ago, they burnt and vandalized the building. They did this to make sure we have no place to return to.
When these Tigrayan monks were attacked last year, they fled to different parts of Tigray, including Shura and Aksum. They said the allied forces had hunted them down even to the other cities of Tigray. The invading troops poisoned food that they could not carry away, thinking the mugs would in fact return to eat it and therefore die. The monks said monkeys and other apes and other animals had eaten this food that was poisoned and resulted in deaths, which was meant originally for the monks. Last month, a number of manuscripts believed to have been looted from Tigray monasteries appeared for online sale on eBay, Etsy, and other social media sites where you could sell your goods and prizes. Researchers say Tigray war has seen up to 500,000 dead from violence and starvation. Despite the huge death toll, there are growing fears that Russia's current invasion of Ukraine will overshadow all the crisis that is taking place, like the war in Tigray currently. Tamnit Bayru presents this report by the Globe and Mail.
As many as 500,000 people have died from the war and famine in Tigray region of northern Ethiopia for over the past 16 months. The estimate by experts who have closely monitored the Tigray conflict since its beginning is a rare attempt to calculate the war-related death toll in a region that has been largely cut off from the outside world. The estimate includes 50,000 to 100,000 victims of direct killings, 150,000 to 200,000 starvation deaths, and more than 100,000 additional deaths caused by lack of health care. This is according to researchers led by Jane Nason of Ghent University in Belgium. The war began when Ethiopia sent its military into Tigray in an attempt to subdue the regional government in November of 2020. The neighboring country of Eritrea also sent troops into Tigray, and the war has led to massacres of civilians, destruction of hospitals and clinics, and an exodus of refugees, and the emergence of famine. Despite the huge death toll, there are growing fears that Russia's invasion of Ukraine will overshadow the Tigray war and other long-running conflicts in Africa and the Middle East, reducing global attention and humanitarian aid for these crises. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres told journalists on Monday, "We are seeing clear evidence of this war draining resources and attention from other troubled spots in desperate need." In Ethiopia, authorities have blocked communications and flights into Tigray since the war began, while heavily restricting media access. The Ethiopian government has been very efficient in shielding Tigray from outside eyes. The death toll in Tigray is poorly documented because humanitarian workers are banned from bringing cameras into the region and continue to be threatened with expulsion if they speak out. Professor Nason and his team have maintained a database of confirmed deaths in Tigray since the war began, in which they recorded 289 incidents, causing the deaths of up to 12,478 civilians. They believe the true number of deaths from violence is far higher than this. Starvation is even a bigger threat. The vast majority of Tigray is considered hard to reach or highly restricted. In the latest UN humanitarian report, malnutrition is also increasing, and humanitarian agencies say their supplies of food and fuel are almost exhausted. Most have been forced to suspend or drastically reduce their operations. Because of the lack of food aid, lack of income, and dysfunctional markets, the majority of Tigray's families have resorted to begging, cutting meals, or selling their harvest to pay off their debts, the UN report said. Unlike the Ukraine war, however, the Tigray conflict has not led to any international sanctions or votes of condemnation in the UN General Assembly.
It's currently still in effect, and the siege is currently still in effect, and the international community's failure to impose robust punitive sanctions on Isaias and Abiy Ahmed is said to have undermined the basic architecture of the global governance. Member of the Tigray Armed Defense Force Central Command, Getachew Reda, made the remark in a piece he wrote on Africa Report under the title Ethiopia, Isaias Afwerki, and Abiy Ahmed through the prism of the Ukraine conflict. In this article, Getachew Reda wrote that Isaias and Abiy, as chief architects of the genocidal war on Tigray, have repeatedly violated the core tenets of the international humanitarian law as well as the international humanitarian rights law. He added that the chief preoccupation of the authoritarian duo at the moment is coming up with creative ways to exterminate the people and the civilians of Tigray. By not standing up to these local bullies, the international community has been complicit in the incremental erosion of the basic rules and the norms governing the conduct of states within their domestic jurisdiction, as well as their international relations. This is inaction on the part of the international community has created norm-shattering precedents that it is okay for powerful countries to either gang up against supposedly nettlesome weaker nations or just take over in general. If tyrants are allowed to violate the basic rules of international order, Getachew Reda said in the article, the system begins to fall apart at the seams. Although Isaias Afwerki has suffered widespread international opprobrium for his genocidal role in Tigray, the international community has yet imposed sufficiently robust sanctions to compel him to alter his course or to just stop in general. Getachew Reda underlined that now Isaias has publicly supported a war of aggression against a UN member of state. According to this article, in a large part due to the failure to penalize Isaias for his destructive role in Tigray, there's no end in sight, and Isaias' commitment to destroying Tigray as he has intensified his de facto alliance with the expansionist Amhara elites against Tigray is currently ongoing. Isaias' military has helped train tens of thousands of Amhara paramilitary troops in western Tigray, which Amhara regional governments has illegally annexed and are currently still in power of. The presence of the Eritrean army in western Tigray also continues to underwrite the annexation of the constitutionally established Tigrayan territory. And Getachew said Abiy Ahmed and Isaias have shown the world how their true colors on multiple occasions have showed out. He added that duo have quite self-consciously rejected an overwhelming balancing coalition against a powerful aggressor bent on revising the liberal international system and challenging the basic settlement and undergirding peace in the post-Cold War of Europe. Getachew stressed in his article, yet the international community has had considerable difficulty taking these authoritarian leaders at their words. Journalists are painting a worsening humanitarian crisis that's taking place in the Tigray region Taghat Media posted an article based on reports by TMH and VOA journalists in Tigray, which depicts a grim picture of the blockaded region in northern Ethiopia. It's been 9 months since the government employees were last paid any salary, and in Tigray, where elementary schools have resumed in some places, teachers are fainting and collapsing in front of their students due to this ongoing humanitarian aid. It is commonplace to see teachers and civil servants beg for food. A lot of people are unusually thin. More and more people have sallow and shallow-pitted facial expressions. People talk to themselves in manner not considered normal is a common sight. And the people of Tigray are deserting their homelands, migrating to wherever their feet leads them astray, especially people who used to live in places where there was already a shortage of rainfall and have either succumbed to beggary or just displacement as whole. One journalist quoted an official from the administration of Ndabat Ama district in central Tigray as saying that about half of the people who used to live in the rural areas of the district have left their places and their homes and have become in ruins. And this, in fact, other people in Adaga Arbi, a nearby town, also have confirmed this fact. People cannot go to towns to beg because people in towns are in even worse, dire straits due to the closure of banks and the suspension of salaries, as well as the outcome of airstrike drones as well. In some towns, and smaller towns in the outskirts of Ma'ala, the situation is even more dire. There's no soap for bathing. Personal hygiene is just simply a luxury right now. Starvation is becoming extremely rampant. The little aid that trickles in handed out to those are most affected, but now everyone is equally as desperate for the help and need as well. Transport services is almost non-existent in Ma'ala. Movement within the city is very limited, and the few taxi services that are currently available are prohibitively expensive, and as a result, family members who live in different parts of Tigray have not met for about a year or so now. People do not have any cash. Those with some money could not find even basic groceries to buy with the cash. Where there is, it is very expensive as well. As for the people dying to the lack of medication, a study showed over 5,400 people have died due to the lack of medication over the last 3 months. And according to the reporters, if the ongoing siege on Tigray is allowed to continue, the people of Tigray will face a danger difficult to even comprehend or get out of. As we move on to our final story for today, Security and Justice for Tigrayans, also known as SJT, has called for more concerted effort to push for the passing into law of H.R. 6600. U.S. House Foreign Relations Committee has passed the first draft resolution called H.R. 6600 in the Ethiopia Stabilization, Peace and Democracy Act to the U.S. Congress for approval. This bill sets out clear and tangible measures critical to end the civil war, alleviate human suffering, and bring stabilization, peace, and democracy in Ethiopia as whole. According to the most recent UNOCHA report, less than 10% of the aid required has been allowed into the Tigray region. Although there are 11 major routes leading to Tigray, these roads have all been blocked by the current government. As noted by USAID Chief Samantha Powers, while a lot of work has been done to distribute aid to other conflict-affected regions, Tigray remains completely blocked off. The systematic blockade, aerial bombings, the denial of services in Tigray as whole, and even the mass arrests and the harassments of Tigrayans basically solely on their merit is occupied parts of Tigray and elsewhere in Ethiopia have left Tigrayans with little to no means to sustain their day-to-day living. Observers stress that the time for meaningful action that will save the lives of millions of people is fast running out, and they believe the efforts like H.R. 6600 are essential to ensure concerted action by the international community to bring the brutal conflict and just the flagrant human rights and humanitarian violations to an end and to ensure accountability for the terrible atrocities as well. Security and Justice for Tigrayans called on all Tigrayans and their sympathizers to do more for the passage of the bill by the Congress and as well as sign the petition that is currently on their site. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.